Hello, welcome back to the Guns and Outdoors channel. I hope you're doing well. One of the problems that can happen during a disaster, depending on the level of severity, is that medical services can quickly become overwhelmed. Today, we're going to take a prepper's view into the topic of disaster preparedness and the wise use of antibiotics and medicines from that medical perspective. We're going to allow ourselves to go into some far leaning scenarios. So just pick one in your mind and just imagine, right? Generally, it's going to start with tremendous pressure on the medical system as a whole to treat the injured, along with difficulty of supplies once they initially run out. How do you resupply? It's going to get compounded if we have any said power outages. It's just going to put pressure on the system as a whole for that medical personnel to keep up. It's going to create a situation where certain medicines may not be available. Medicines will become rationed. We see that again during normal times. Look at the last few years with the pressure we had on the system, not enough nurses, a lot of nurses quitting. The next generation, got a lot of older generations retiring, just the ratios are off, right? So during normal times, we're already where we are. And then how about extraordinary times? If you go ahead and add in perhaps grid down electrical power situations, yeah, there's a real potential for collapse. And it's going to be wise for you in your disaster preparedness plan that you're going to put in place or that you have in place to also include medicines and antibiotics for when there's no doctor. In these worst case scenarios, you see, our doctors and pharmacists are going to be compelled to hurriedly close their own practices in order to handle their own family emergencies back home. It's going to be important for you to be prepared. With this in mind, medical care is one area in which we should try to be as self sufficient as possible. Go ahead and put in your mind's eye and start reflecting on your current level of supplies, training, knowledge, and do you have any of that hands on experience? We've been talking about on this channel medical and first aid. It's good to have those TCCC basic first aid classes. You got to get that. Now we're going to pivot and look at stockpiling and medicine supplies. If you go downstairs, look at your medicine cabinet, what do you have in there? A stockpiling of medicines. How about antibiotics? If you think it through, there's definitely going to be a critical need for those in the future. Roll that into your disaster preparedness plan. Make sure that you have one in place for that unexpected disaster or crisis when it hits and there's nobody else to help you out. Smash the like button, subscribe to the channel as we prep to dive in, and stand by. Welcome back. Let me get this out of the way as we dive into the topic. I'm not a medical doctor, so this video is informational purposes only. It's not intended to serve as a substitute for professional medical advice. I disclaim any and all liability arising directly or indirectly from the use of information contained in my video. If you're in a serious medical emergency today during normal times when we have the power grid up and healthcare professional is available, go ahead and consult them. Let's start with one of the cardinal rules, staying alive, right? For yourself, keeping yourself and your family alive is number one. Disaster preparedness. When those disasters strike, you're going to need to have more than just a couple of outdated MREs in your garage and that store-bought IFAC on your competition gun belt. Developing, just as we are students of the gun, we need to carry over that same mental focus, that passion, and that appreciation for learning into the medical and antibacterial space. If you find yourself in a long-term disaster or major crisis where there's no power grid, perhaps due to any of the following: a major electromagnetic pulse of natural or even artificial origin, right? Such as the one that happened in 1859 with that solar storm that hit, otherwise known as the Keratin event. If it's man made, we're looking at modern warfare, weapons delivering high energy EMPs in an upper atmosphere designed to disrupt communications equipment. Computers needed to operate modern weapons, warplanes, even the entire electrical network of a targeted country could be out of commission. Recognize that stakes have transcended to a whole new level of ball game if something like that happened without rule of law. We're going to experience a long-term power outage and societal disruption. It's going to come very soon thereafter. Depending on the duration of the scenario, it's easy to expect things to start popping off in isolated pockets in less than 24 hours. It's just not known how long the electrical blackouts would last or to the extent of the damage that we would accrue across the country. One thing's for certain is that an EMP attack would damage and destroy most of the US's power, communications, and transport systems. as well as disable our banks, our hospitals, and our nuclear power plants. Yeah, we're going to have compounding effects if that happens. We're going to have many issues. Embedded in all that bad news is the next major disease. We're all too familiar with that over the last few years, right? There's no doubt about it. Currently, if you look at what's going on in the world, we see two regional conflicts happening right now. At present, we got two wars raging. And if you look at them, they were going house to house. They were in tunnels, tunnel by tunnels. And the other one was going city by city, almost World War I style trench warfare. We definitely live in calamitous times and to some degree have an uncertain future. That starts to get down to some other topics. So we're going to bring it back full circle and we're going to keep that focus today on our medical. During normal times, as I said earlier, you can expect to deal with just lots of ankle sprains, colds, cuts, rashes, and other common medical issues that affect people. Developing skills and knowing where to look in order to treat disease, as we said in the EMT field, spot the signs and symptoms of infection, come up with a plan to safely treat patients, along with storing properly antibiotics, is going to be massively important. I recommend a couple of books, and we're going to hit them first. The first one is Where There Is No Doctor. It's a village healthcare handbook by David Warner. It's excellent softback reference for treating medical conditions when doctors are unavailable. It's a great reference for the everyday folks in third world countries, right? It's got chapters on everything. Here's the second one. Jot this one down as well. It's called Alton's Antibiotics and Infectious Diseases, The Layman's Guide to Available Antibacterials in Austere Settings by Joseph Alton, MD, and Amy Alton. One of the things I'll kind of give you the cliff notes on that, the key points. There are descriptions of various infections, their diagnoses, and how to address them. The book is a quick read. When I got it in, I thought it was outstanding reference. I read it in about one day. Once you read through it, you kind of get the gist of it. You know that you can then just take a particular illness or a prescription and then take you right to that particular page or section of the book. If you walk away with nothing else today from the video, then have it be to go ahead and smash the like button now down below, subscribe to the channel, then go out and get yourself a copy of these two books. One of the things that's commonly asked when you start looking into antibiotics and long-term storage of medicines is, where can I get survival antibiotics? Here in the United States, you have to have a prescription to buy them, but I'm going to go ahead and go through 4 areas of things that you may not know. Number 1, it's not uncommon for a lot of US citizens to go down to Mexico and buy things that they need pretty much without a prescription. Also, the cost of medicines, the qualities there as well, the costs are pretty low. Number 2, you can reach out to your GP that you have a good relationship with and you can start to have a conversation. Tell them something along the lines of, you got a big trip coming up, you're traveling overseas to a third world country, and that you're worried about the standard of care you'll be given or not given should there be a disaster where you fall ill. And go ahead and ask your doctor if they'll write you a couple of prescriptions, and then be sure to tell them that you promise that you'll reach out to them in the event that you need to take them. Number 3, there's online medical services that legitimately offer consultations and antibiotic prescriptions as long as you do your part and register, complete their questionnaires properly, correspond with the doctor that you're assigned, and you're on the up and up. And to that end, I honestly signed up for Jace Medical. Jot that down. The process was easy. It wasn't intimidating. I was able to buy myself a supply of 4 or 5 common antibiotics from Jace Medical. We're going to review some of those here in a minute. If you want to go this route like I independently did, then I have a discount code, which is better than nothing for you. So write down G and the and sign O10. So G and O10, Guns and Outdoors 10, and it's going to save you 10%. Disclaimer, the service is pricey, but in my personal experience, I've determined that this service was legitimate. From a pharmacy in the US, I was worried about them being overseas and all that kind of stuff. And I corresponded with a doctor who was actually in my home state, received my antibiotic prescription in a timely manner. I was very pleased with the service. Number 4, you've heard of this one before, fish antibiotics. This topic is out of scope of this video, but they're certainly available as a lot of names have changed over the years, and the dosages and things like that are a little more difficult when I looked into it to match up and figure out There are references that have it, but you have to be extra diligent. I highly recommend you do your own research, but keep in mind that fish antibiotics, while they're made on the same assembly lines, they're different. There's different dosages, right? Animals, humans, fish. So those dosages are going to vary. So you'll have to do the math on that, and that's where it gets a little bit intimidating. Let me hit you with a little history review, right? We're going to start with pathogens. These are disease causing organisms that have the ability to damage a host when they invade. There's going to be a number of different pathogens that can cause infectious disease: bacteria, viruses, protozoa, and fungi. All right. Let me hit you with also a trip down memory lane for humanity. Mankind had a long history of widespread disease and illness. All right. We'll look at the Great Plague of Athens in 430 BC, the Plague of Justinian in 540 AD, where 26% of the world's population was really affected by the plague for over 200 years. The Black Death bubonic plague that hit Europe and came to the West in the 14th century. And in more modern times, there was the plague that began in China, India, Hong Kong in the 1860s, where ports around the world experienced outbreaks of diseases for 20 years, eventually leading back then to over 15 million deaths. In more recent teachings in U.S. history, we've had the Spanish flu of 1918. 15 to 100 million people are believed to have died, and many more since then. When it comes to antibiotics, it's important to know that they only fight bacteria based diseases. They do no good for viruses or diarrhea, backaches, bruises, in cases where little Johnny has a headache, common colds, virus based infections. But if you need antibiotics and you can't get them, then you're going to be thankful that you do have them because you put them back. Which antibiotics are the most have for survival? There's actually quite a number of different antibiotics on the market. Some common and others are quite exotic. For the most part, you're going to want to stockpile antibiotics that will be useful for the widest variety of applications, especially the treatment of infections that result from injuries. The different antibiotics work in different ways against specific infections. And this is where you got to do your research. All antibiotics have dangers in their use, but some are more dangerous than others. So take great care, do your research when you're choosing antibiotics. 7 useful guidelines. So number 1, if you do not know exactly how to use an antibiotic and what infections it can be used for, don't use it. 2, use the antibiotic only as recommended. Keep using antibiotics until the illness is completely cured, or at least 2 days after the fever and other signs of infection have gone. But keep in mind, there are some illnesses like tuberculosis and leprosy that need to be treated for many months or years after the person feels better. Number 3, only use antibiotics when the need is great. When antibiotics are used too much, they begin to not work as well. 4, for persons who are allergic to penicillin, use another antibiotic such as erythromycin or a sulfa. In my case, my wife's actually allergic to sulfa as well. So you really got to, look at this type of stuff. 5, don't use a tetracycline, an ampicillin, or another broad-based antibiotics for illness that can probably be controlled with penicillin if you have it, or another narrow spectrum antibiotic. Broad spectrum antibiotics, they attack many more kinds of bacteria versus the narrow, right? Yeah, you're going to kill the bad stuff, but you also kill the good stuff, right? It's just part of the game here. Now we're going to go through 5 of the more commonly available antibiotics on the market, and we're going to discuss each of them briefly. So just jot the names down. You can do your research later, but I'm just going to throw it at you. Number 1, amoxicillin. It's going to be similar to penicillin. It's a very useful antibiotic. Fights a certain kinds of infections. All right. Anything that produces pus, great for wounds, pneumonia, UTI, ear infections, Lyme disease. Amoxicillin is considered generally safe for use during pregnancy and is tolerated well by patients. Amoxicillin has issues related to growing bacterial resistance, very similar to the penicillin family, right? When that came out in the 40s, it was awesome. But, we're just developing that type of resistance now. Number 2, erythromycin, otherwise known as Zithromax, Zmax, Z-Pax. I know you've heard of that. It's a big gun antibiotic which treats difficult to treat bacterial infections, typically sold in a 6 pill package to be used in 5 days. So, generally, with this one, they have you take two the first day to kind of get you ramped up, and then you take it, right? It's probably your number one go to, and it's often prescribed as an alternative to penicillin for people who are allergic to that. It's a versatile antibiotic used for infections in the lung, gastro systems, treat respiratory infections like pneumonia, ear infections, eye infections, pink eyes, traveler diarrhea, STDs, as well as like whooping cough, Lyme disease, bronchitis, Legionnaires. All right. You have indications and contraindications, right? Signs where things where you would take it and things where you would not take it. The contraindication for this one is you wouldn't want to take it if you have a history of liver problems or any kind of heart issues like arrhythmia. If you're of older age and you have bradycardia, which is a slow heart rate, you need to talk to your doctor on that one. All right. Number three, doxycycline. This is from the tetracycline family. It's a broad spectrum antibiotic used to treat infections caused by bacteria. It's acceptable use for those that are allergic to penicillin. All right, this is a real good one. Now, it's contraindicated for people that are pregnant, breastfeeding, children under 8. It's an extraordinary versatile drug with many positive indications. Things like diarrheal disease caused by E. coli, Shingles, Listeria. A lot of these places, like in Oregon, these homeless camps and stuff, where this stuff's running recently in the news, they're getting real sick through that, right? Just cleanliness standards, right? Dysentery like infections. Good for STDs, Lyme diseases, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, as well as anthrax, all kind of stuff, cholera, typhus, plague, respiratory, MRSA, periodontal disease, gingivitis, malaria. Doxycycline can be used as a preventative against malaria by taking 100 milligram once a day when you're in high risk areas. Having said all that, resistance to doxycycline is becoming an issue as well, but not so much as the other stuff. Number four, don't kill me on this, metronidazole. This one is interesting one. If you're watching my hiking, camping videos, you're going to be familiar with the what this is used to treat, especially if you've ever filtered your water and that you've been drinking from streams and outdoor unfiltered water sources. It's going to be used to treat infections caused by anaerobic bacteria and protozoa. And protozoa are those one-celled microbes that get in your system with contaminated, unfiltered drinking water, and they can make you sick. Unlike viruses, protozoa are usually susceptible to treatment with certain antibiotics, such as this one. Can also be used in bite wounds combined with other antibiotics, basically used for dysentery and giardia, wounds, skin, dental, diverticulitis, as well as intestinal infections seen in older individuals. Contraindications on this one where you don't want to take it: pregnant, breastfeeding, can't take it and drink alcohol, and it's acceptable to those that are allergic to penicillin. And number five, ciprofloxacin, or otherwise known as, you'll know this one, Cipro. Most people have heard about it, but you may not be as familiar with some of the side effects on it. Cipro, while an effective antibiotic, has a significant risk due to reports that it can cause weakness in muscles and tendons. I know that one sounds weird, as well as seizures, liver issues, heart issues. For me and my family on the personal front, I will share with you, I'm probably going to do everything possible to take other antibiotics versus this one in order not to take it. I suppose if my life depended on it and the grid was down and it's going to go real bad and your life depends on it, yeah, sure, you're going to take it, right? This one has a long list of things that it's great for and also a long list of side effects. So if you've taken it before, go ahead and let us know what your experience was down below. All right. Cipro is used to treat anthrax exposure, infections, traveler's diarrhea, UTI, prostate, sinus, typhoid fever, bronchitis, pneumonia, traveler's diarrhea, cholera, dysentery as well. But then here's the nasty parts of it. It's been reported in some cases to actually cause nerve damage, changes in mental status. So having said all that, you know, I tried to figure out what the instances were and you cannot quote me on it. It looked to me like one out of every 10,000. So again, If you have any questions on this one in normal times, talk to your doctor. I know it got a little heavy there for a second with some of these side effects, but if you decide to stockpile antibiotics, this is stuff that you need to know. So if I'm helping you out, make sure you smash the like button. We're now going to talk about storage because this is another commonly not known topic. So, how long can I keep these things and what's storage like? I can only give you general guidelines. You're going to need to consider the effects of heat on your supply, moisture, light. You're going to have to plan accordingly. How do you tell if a drug has been affected negatively? Well, you can try to smell it. Does it smell weird? Does it smell different? Do you see a change visually in color or consistency? That could signal that the medication has been degraded. It's well known that a lot of medicines generally can last longer than their particular expiration date. In many cases, drugs, pill, powder, and capsule format, they're going to be potent for years after expiration date, but it really varies by each one. Now, there have been some studies done by the government on this. I've reviewed them for my own edification. You can go get the reports, go to the websites. My personal conclusion is it varies by antibiotic. In general, there was like one or two that lasted 10 plus years. There were a few batches that lasted 5 to 7 years beyond expiration date. The government will go in and recertify them because they've got all these stockpiles and they don't want to throw all this stuff away. So they try to research them. But in general, they just don't keep extending. They will, expire them out. Right. In addition to kind of knowing all that, as well as coupling that with your survival basics of how to store food, purify water, make your house safer, generate power, properly defend yourself, protect your family. It's all important. A good thing to think about is that antibiotics would be also a great barter down the line, just in many post disaster scenarios, right? Antibiotics, we all think about ammunition, alcohol, precious metals, all things to think about and potentially work on putting back, right? Now, I would suppose I probably would hold off on my antibiotics. Once you trade that, you're not getting them back. I probably would have those last. All right, but speaking of quantities, like the fish stuff and all that, you really can't stockpile too much simply because there's always going to need people. In a worst case scenario, there's going to need them, right? All right, and there you have it. There's your video on antibiotics along with strategies and the wise use of them during a catastrophic situation where there are no medical services that can help you. I hope you found the video entertaining, enlightening, and helpful, and that it resonated with you. Go ahead and notate down below, in some generalities, what you thought. What do you have? Are there any other antibiotics that you've put back? What is your research showing you? And while you're at it, go ahead and like subscribe to the Guns and Outdoors channel. And until next time, take care of yourselves. We're out of here. See ya.